Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah Shir. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel and Yirtzeh Hashem. Today we will be learning Daf Kuf Samach Aleph Amid Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos. We pick up today on the very bottom line of Kuf Samach Aleph Amid Aleph, Siman Shin Chav Vav Sif Hey, continuing to learn the halachas of rechitza, bathing, washing on Shabbos. Our learning should be a schus for Achenu Beis Yisrael Hanasunim Batzar Bashivya Ha'imdim Bein Bayamu Bein Bayabasha Hamakayim Yerachem Alehem V'Yitzim Yitzar Lervacha Me'afelu La'Oiro Mishibud L'Geula Hashta Bagalo V'Zman Kariv V'Naimar Amen. Our learning should be a schus refuah shalema for Yeshua Levi Ben Ahuva Malkachana, Rivka Bashir Aleach, Havadasa Baserel, Yitzchak Ben Tzion Ben Dusha. They should all have refuah shalema b'sar Shar Chayla Yisrael. And our learning, the learning of Klal Yisrael, the Talmud Torah of Klal Yisrael, should be a schus. The Rebbeinu Shalom should watch over every single member of Klal Yisrael. B'chol makom shehem. Okay, so since we began learning the halachas of rechitza, we saw that you're not allowed to wash using mayim chamin shehu chamu miba'od yom. If you have water that was heated up before Shabbos, it is usher to use that to wash kol gufay, your entire body, or even roiv gufay, or even the majority of your body, because rubai kikulay. And this is also because of gzeira midrabanan. What's the gzeira midrabanan? We're afraid that if we're going to allow you to wash using hot water, even though it was heated up before Shabbos, we're afraid that that might lead to people heating up water on Shabbos, which will very easily entail Isurei Daraisa. How about using hot water that was heated up on Shabbos? Hot water that was heated up on Shabbos, you're not allowed to use it all. You're not allowed to wash your pinky with it. If it's water that was heated up on Shabbos, that's totally usher. But even water that was heated up before Shabbos, you're allowed to wash your hands, you're allowed to wash your face, panav, yadav, raglav. You could wash a small area of your body, but to wash roiv gufay or certainly kol gufay is usher. This is an issa derabanan. Now, in the previous share in Sifhei, we discussed a very interesting case. In that case, a person went ahead, he took mayim tsoininim, he took cold water, and he washed off roiv gufay or kol gufay with cold water. Mutter. According to the Mechaber, totally mutter. Take a bucket of water, pour a bucket of water, cold water, over yourself, no problem. Now what did he do? He went and he stood keneged hamedura. He went over to the fire. He's got a wood-burning stove, and he stood next to the fire to warm himself up. Now by doing this, he's going to heat the water that is on his body. Mishnah Berurah told us, we're certainly not worried here about bishul. We're not worried about cooking up the water, because that wouldn't be usher unless you bring the water to the temperature of Yatzer Ledes. We don't think that this person is trying to cook himself. So he's not going to bring the water to Yatzer Ledes. He's not going to create mayim chamin. He's only going to create mayim foishrin. He's going to make warm water, not hot water. Yet, the Mechaber said this is usher. Why? Because it's true. You washed yourself with cold water, which we said is mutter, but now you're heating the water up. Said the Mechaber in Sifhei, this is akin to washing yourself with water that was heated up before Shabbos, and therefore it's usher to do this if you're washing roiv gufay or certainly kol gufay. So again, in Sifhei, the Mechaber gave this case the halacha of washing yourself with water that was heated up before Shabbos. So therefore, what's usher? What's usher is to do this if you washed at least roiv gufay. According to the Mechaber in Sifhei, if you washed your hands and now you want to warm up your hands keneged hamedura and warm up the water that's on your hands, that would be mutter. Because if we're giving it the halacha of mayim shehu chamu miba'od yom, water that was heated up before Shabbos, well, you're allowed to wash part of your body. As long as it's not roiv gufay, you're allowed to wash part of your body with that water. So you want to wash your face, wash your hands, wash your feet, wash a small area of your body, and stand keneged hamedura. According to the Mechaber in Sifhei, this would be mutter. Now the Mishnah Berurah pointed out that really this is funny, Because in this case, are we dealing with mayim shehu chamu miba'od yom? Are we dealing with water that was heated up before Shabbos? No. The water is getting heated on Shabbos. So why are we applying to it the halacha of mayim shehu chamu miba'od yom? Why don't we instead apply to it the halacha of mayim shehu chamu be'Shabbos, water that was heated on Shabbos? Now, water that's heated on Shabbos, you're not allowed to wash even your hands. So that was the Mishnah Berurah's question that we learned in the previous year. And the Mishnah Berurah explained it to us. The Mishnah Berurah said, in this case, is the person washing himself with hot water? No. This is not rechitza gemura in mayim kamen. The person's not really washing himself with hot water. He washed himself with cold water. Subsequent to the washing, after he went ahead and washed himself with cold water, now he's heating the water up. So said the Mishnah Berurah, according to the Deya, according to the opinion that the Mechaber presents in Sif Hey, this is not really a case of washing yourself with hot water. Therefore, we're more makel, and even though the water is getting heated up on Shabbos, we apply to it the halacha of mayim shehu chamu miba'od yom, and this is only aser if you washed at least roiv gufay. That was Sif Hey. But now we come to Sif Vav, and that was Sif Dalet. I'm sorry, that was Sif Dalet. I keep on saying Sif Hey. That was Sif Dalet. Now we come to Sif Hey, and in Sif Hey, the Mechaber is going to present us a more makber opinion. He brings down from the Torah, says the Mechaber, bottom line, Kuf Samach Aleph Amud Aleph, Yesh Oimrim, there is an opinion that says, Shetzarech Lizar Shaloi Lechabim Yadav Eitzel Ha'esh Achar Netila. There is a Yesh Oimrim that says, even if you only washed your hands, certainly less than roiv gufay, you have to be careful not to go warm up your hands keneged ha'esh, keneged hamadura. Im lo yenagvem tchila yafeh, unless you first dry off your hands very well so that you're not heating up the water. And what's the reason for this? So the Mishnah Berurah explained, because this shita holds that since the water is becoming heated on Shabbos, we apply to it the halacha of water that was heated on Shabbos, and the halacha of water that's heated on Shabbos is that you're not allowed to wash even a tiny part of your body using that water. That brings us to turn the page to Kuf Samach Aleph Amud Beis, Sif Vav, a very interesting halacha. Says the Mechaber, also, litein al gabe bitnoi, you're not allowed to place on your belly, on your body, doesn't have to specifically be your belly, kli sheyesh by mayim chamen, a keli, a vessel that's filled with hot water. Now, this was very common. Certainly, I grew up with this. Let me tell you something. My mother, she should be gesund und stark. My mother, almost every night, would ask for a hot water bottle. My mother was always cold. If it was during the winter, she was certainly cold. During the summer, she's cold because people have the air conditioning on. Every night before it was time to go to sleep, my job was to take that rubber hot water bottle, fill it up with good hot water. If it was too hot, I had to wrap it in a towel and bring it to my mother. She would tuck that hot water bottle under the blanket with her. Sometimes she would place it on her stomach. Unfortunately, there must be a gene in my family where many of us seem to suffer with intestinal ailments, and that hot water bottle would help her. So she would put this hot water bottle on her stomach. This is essentially what the Mechaber is talking about here, but the Mechaber, we're going to see in the Mishnah Berurah, the Mechaber is not talking about a closed hot water bottle. The Mechaber is talking about simply a keli, a vessel, a bowl, a cup, a tureen that's filled with hot water. Says the Mechaber, you're not allowed to take an open keli that has hot water on it and place it al bitnoi and place it on your body. And says the Mechaber, va'afilu b'choil. This is also, forget Hilchos Shabbos. It's also to do this on a Tuesday. Why, says the Mechaber? Mipnei hasakona. Because this is dangerous. The Torah Kedusha tells us we have to take very good care of ourselves. It's a daraisa. We have to watch out. We have to protect our health. So you're not allowed to do this because it's dangerous. Sometimes that water could be exceptionally hot, and then if it spills, chas v'chalila, you'll scald yourself. So the Mechaber says this is aser. Says the Ramah, avol mutar lahake beged v'litnai al bitnai, but what you would be allowed to do is to take a beged, let's say take a towel, and make a towel hot. Now, he doesn't say over here anything about making that towel hot using hot water. making the towel hot with water is going to entail all sorts of other shilas. We're going to come up to shilas of shriyasai zeu kibusai, whether soaking something is akin to kibus, it's akin to laundering it. We're going to come up with problems of you're not allowed to get a towel soaking wet because shema yavali de schita, you might come to wring it out. So getting a towel or a beged hot with water is going to be a different kettle of fish. Over here, he just says you're allowed to warm up a towel. So, for example, back in the day when I was growing up in the apartment building in Borough Park, you had the good old-fashioned steam radiators. You could take a bath towel and put it over the radiator and get the bath towel nice and hot, and then use that to keep yourself warm. You have no issue of sakana over here of pouring scalding water on yourself. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah cutting your test. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Va'afilu b'chayil, to put a keli full of hot water on you is also even during the week. V'chol shkein the aser b'Shabbos. Certainly, there's an added problem if you're going to do this on Shabbos. What's the problem? The topic of Siman Shin Chavav. Shema yishbechu alav. Maybe the water will spill on you. Now, the water spilling on you is going to entail one problem of a nishmarta ma'od l'nafshei sechem. You could become scalded. It's going to entail a second problem. What's that? The nimtze karoichetz b'Shabbos. If you spill hot water on yourself, now what are you doing? You're doing rechitza b'mayim chamen. You're washing yourself with hot water on Shabbos. Even if that water was heated up before Shabbos, you're not allowed to wash roiv gufay. If it spills on most of your body, you're going to come up against the Yisud Rabbanon of rechitza. Kain kasver Rashi v'haran. Ulafizeh, according to this, says the Chavetz Chaim, according to this, that this is the issue, that the issue over here is a problem that we're worried that the water might spill, and that's going to cause a sakana issue and perhaps a rechitza issue. Ulafizeh, im hachamin bekli sagur. But if you have the water in a closed keli, aka a hot water bottle with a good seal on it, shekarin varm flesh, which the Chavetz Chaim says in Yiddish was called a varm flash, a warm flask, a hot water bottle, shari, it's mutter. No problem of sakana. Those hot water bottles closed nice and tight. No worry about rechitza. Again, it's closed tight. It's not going to spill. But according to Tosfos in Masechta Shabbos on Mem Amud Beis, Ta'atam mishum deminkar shehu l'refuah. Tosfos brings up a third issue with using the hot water bottle. Like I told you, my mother would use that hot water bottle for her intestinal issues. Well, in that case, you're doing it for refuah. Tosfos says, when people use these kind of hot water bottles, Tosfos held that it's a minkar. It's obvious that what they're doing is for refuah purposes. Therefore, it would be also gzeirim shem shchikas samanim. We know that you're not allowed to do things for refuah on Shabbos, a gzeira that you might come to grind up herbs that have medicinal value to create drugs on Shabbos. So then, gambozeh aser. So then, according to this, even a sealed hot water bottle would be aser because it would be considered an act of refuah. It would be aser gzeirim mishum shchikas samanim. Well, l'tzarich gadol yesh lahakol, but the Mishnah Berurah says l'tzarich gadol, if there's a great need, you could be mekel. Now, Ramah said mutar lahache beged, you're allowed to warm up a beged, to use this to warm your body. V'hadin lahachim kli b'Shabbos, or to warm up some kind of a keli. The mutar af lepirish ha-Tosfos hanal, that would be mutar even according to Tosfos. T'lo minka kach kach shehu l'refuah. When somebody takes some kind of a keli and makes it warm and puts it next to their body, even according to Tosfos, that's not minkar. It's not recognizable that you're doing something for refuah purposes, and therefore it would be mutter. Moving along to Sif Zayin, second line down, Kusamach Alach Hamid Bey says the Mechaber. Very interesting. Haroichitz b'nohar. So let's remember, according to the Mechaber, the whole Isser of Rechitza that we've been dealing with here in Shin Chavav is Gzeira D'Rabbanan, and it only applies to hot water. The whole problem of Rechitza is you're using hot water, and even though you're using Mayim Shehu Chamumi Ba'od Yom, there's a gzeira. If we allow you to do this, you might come to heat up water on Shabbos. So you want to go swimming, you want to go into the Nahar. Again, I shouldn't say swimming. You want to go dunk in the river in cold water. Why should that be aser? There's no Isser Malacha in going and going into the river. So in the world of the Mechaber, no problem. Go into the cold river. What's the problem? But the Mechaber does bring up that there is a risk that you're going to come up against an Isser Malacha. What Isser Malacha? The Isser of Hoitzah, of carrying. So let's see Siv Zayin. Says the Mechaber, Haroichitz Benahar, somebody who goes and bathes in the cold river, Tzarech, or if it's in a natural hot spring, we saw there's no Isser in a natural hot spring. Haroichitz Benahar, you're washing in the river. Tzarech sheyinagev gufa yafeh, you have to dry off your body very well. Kishe oile mehanahar, immediately upon your exit from the river. Immediately after you step out of the water and you're on the riverbank, you have to dry yourself off very well before you walk. So you got to come out of the river, stand there, and immediately dry yourself off. Why, says the Mechaber? Mipnei shelo yisharu hamayim alav. You have to do this to make sure that there's no water that remains on your body. And if you walk, v'yataltalem arba amos b'karmelis. We're assuming that when you come up out of the river, you're not going to be in a true midaraisa rishus harabim. Remember, a daraisa rishus harabim is a major thoroughfare. It's a street. It's at least 16 amos wide. It goes from one end of the city to the other. It's a makom hiluch shishim ribu. 600,000 people use it. That's a true rishus harabim. Usually, like you go to the park and there's a river, or wherever you go on the side of a river, we would not expect that to be a true rishus harabim daraisa. But it's also not a rishus hayochid. What is it? It's a karmelis. It's a rishus derabanan. To transport something dalet amos to the karmelis is an issa derabanan. Says the Mechaber, it's very nice that mitam issa rechitza, as far as the prohibition of rechitza is concerned, you could go bathe in the cold river and there's no problem. But when you come out of the river, you're soaking wet. So you've got standing water, so to speak, on your body. If you go now and walk dalet amos in a karmelis, you are carrying, you're transporting that water. And if you go dalet amos, you're being over in issa derabanan. So therefore, says the Mechaber, what you have to do is, immediately after stepping out of the river, you have to dry yourself off very well before you walk any further. And the Mechaber continues 2 lines off the bottom. Lefi sheha oile min rachitza, when you come out of the river after bathing, yesh riboy mayim al gufay. You have a lot of water on your body, and to transport it dalet amos to the karmelis is going to be a derabanan. Okay, let's pause here for a second and let's go to the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah Cotton Chaf Aleph. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Haroichitz Banar, somebody who bathes in the river. Now, the Mechaber is taking as a davar pashut that there's nothing wrong with bathing in the river. Why? Because it's cold water. So there's no gzera of rechitza. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Kasra Paiskim, the Paiskim right, and this is what all of us are familiar with. Kasra Paiskim, the Paiskim right. The Nagu Shaloi Lerchaitz Klal B'Nahar Oy B'Mikvah. The minig is, we don't bathe in the river, we don't bathe in a swimming pool, we don't bathe in the mikvah. We'll talk about tefillah, being toivel in a mikvah, we'll talk about soon. But we don't go into a pool. We don't go into a swimming pool to go bathe on Shabbos. Why? Says the Mishnah Berurah, the Matzoi Lavai Lidei Schitas Seyar Va'oid Kama Ta'amim. What we're afraid of is when you're going to go ahead and you're going to go bathe, your hair is going to get wet, then you're going to wring out your hair, there's going to be an issue of schita, you're going to go use a towel, you're going to get a towel soaking wet, again, there's going to be problems of schita. So the Mishnah Berurah says that there are many reasons, there are many risks of coming up against Isurim that are involved in bathing, and therefore the minig is, says the Mishnah Berurah, that we don't bathe even in cold water, in a nahar, or in a pool, or anything else. Ayin b'magen Avram. Ulinian tefillah, when it comes to be toivel in a mikveh, as far as tuma and tahara, ayin l'kamei, we're going to discuss that soon in Mishnah Berurah's Kadachaf Dalet. Mihu, yadav raglov, motor lechaitz b'nahar. But certainly, to go wash your hands and feet in the river, that there would be no Isser on. So long as you go ahead and you dry yourself off well before you go dalet amos, because of the problem that the Mechaber presents here in Siv Zayin, the problem of Hoitzah. So are you allowed to go bathe in the river? The minig is that we don't bathe in the river. The Mechaber is talking about prior to that minig. The Mechaber said, really, me'ikar adin, there's no reason why you can't go bathe in the cold water of the river, or even if it's a natural hot spring. There's no reason why you can't go bathe. But there is an issue. When you come out, you have to dry yourself off immediately before you walk Dalet Amos, or we're going to see in the Mishnah Berurah, immediately. You shouldn't even walk less than Dalet Amos because of the fear that you might come to walk Dalet Amos, which would be an Isser D'Rabbanan. The Mishnah Berurah is very clear about this. The Mishnah Berurah says the words of the Mechaber were kishe oile, that you should dry yourself off when you come out of the river. When you exit the river, dry yourself off. Ritzayna Lomar, what the Mechaber wants to say is tekif, immediately. Kishe oile samach lanahar. Immediately when you exit the water, right on the riverbank, Yenagev nafshe, you should dry yourself off. V'lo yelech klal b'hamayim she'olav. Do not walk at all, even less than Dalet Amos, with the water that's on your body. Why? Because dilma yishkach v'yelech b'amar b'amos, because we're afraid that you might forget yourself and you might come to walk Dalet Amos and transport the mayim Dalet Amos in a Carmelis, which is an Issa D'Rabbanan. V'imkein. If so, says the Chavetz Chaim, it comes out, mashma mizeh, it is implied from this, the malbushav sheposhton kaidim sheyored lanahar, you went to the river and you undressed right by the river, right? So your clothing is going to be on the riverbank. Says the Mishnah Berurah, it comes out pretty clear that tzarich sheyanichem samach lanar. When you get undressed to go into the river, you can't get undressed, 3.5 amos away from the riverbank and put your clothing down there. No, you should get undressed right by the edge of the water and put your clothing down over there so that immediately upon your exit from the water, you could get dressed. Kedei shelo yelech b'hamayim she'olav, so that you shouldn't have to walk at all with the water that's on you. V'ayin v'al kol panim, certainly says the Mishnah Berurah, hamitpakas, the towel, shemitapech gufay boy, that you're going to dry your body off with, that should certainly be right next to the water, so that you could exit the river and immediately grab the towel and dry yourself off. You shouldn't have to walk even 2 amos to go get the towel. Kidei shelo yelech b'hamayim she'olav. V'ayin b'Pri Megadim, the Chavetz Chaim says, take a look at the Pri Megadim, Tehu hadin b'nohar gufa. The Pri Megadim says, wait a second. The Mechaber is talking to us about what's going to happen when you exit the river. And the Mechaber is afraid that you're going to exit the river, you're going to have water on your body. If you walk Dalet Amos, you're going to be transporting that Mayim Dalet Amos to the Carmelis Issa D'Rabbanan. Says the Pri Megadim, this problem doesn't first apply when you exit the water. This problem already applies in the Nahar, in the river. Now, we're going to learn, Bez Hashem Yisparach, very shortly, we're going to be learning in Chelik Dalid, where we learn the halachas of HaTorah, we're going to learn that the Nahar, a river, has a din of a Carmelis. So says the Pri Megadim, hold it. You go into the river. Now, the Rebbeinu Shalom made this world in a very smart way. When the riverbank usually has a rather gentle slope. So you start walking into the river. It's a foot deep. Then it's 2 feet deep. Then it's 3 feet deep. Eventually you get to where it's 6 feet deep. That's where you want to be roichitz. That's where you want to dunk yourself. That's where you want to wash. So you walk into the river until you get to a place where it's deep enough to do rechitza, and you wash yourself off. You finish washing yourself off, you start to walk back up the slope to exit the river. Now, as you walk back up, part of your body is going to be submerged in the water, right? The lower part of your body is going to be submerged in the water, but the upper part of your body is going to be above the water level. Says the Pri Megadim, as soon as you have a respectable part of your body that's above the water level, you're transporting the water that's on your upper body in a Carmelis, because the Nahar is a Carmelis. We're not worried about the part of your body that's submerged. The part of your body that's submerged, we don't look at it that you're transporting water that's on your body. That part of your body is submerged in water. It's not carrying water. But the part of your body that's above the water level and it has water on it, there you're transporting water. So says the Pri Megadim, as soon as you reach a shallow part of the river, where now your upper body is above the water line and it's got a decent amount of water on it, you're already walking in a carmelist transporting water. So let's look inside. Says the Pri Megadim, Tehuadin Banahar Gufa. This problem arises in the river itself. When you start walking out and you leave the deep part of the river, and you reach a point where half of your body, the upper half of your body, is now above the water level, you have to make sure that you don't walk 4 amas in the river. Shahanar hu carmelis, because the river itself is a carmelis. So if you walk 4 amas in the river, you're already carrying the water that's on your upper body. Dalan amas to the carmelis, it's the derabanan. Well, if he's that, according to this, when you go down into the river to dunk, and at the beginning the water is shallow, you have to make sure not to go 4 amas away from the riverbank. Because if you go 4 amas into the river, and now you start walking back, and you're going to walk 4 amas to the riverbank with your upper body exposed, you're going to be carrying that water, dalan amas to the carmelis. Or, the Mishnah Berurah doesn't say this, or I guess what you could do is, you could dunk, you could crouch in the water, so that as you approach the riverbank, you're still submerged, in which case there wouldn't be a problem here of hoitzah. Okay, now let's go back to the Mechaber, where we're going to see the Mechaber discuss a very interesting shaila. Mechaber says like this, along the same theme, 2 lines off the bottom, a little bit past the halfway point. Says the Mechaber, Aval ha'holich b'Rishus harabim. Let's say somebody walks in the Rishus harabim on a rainy day. Umater seichef al roishai va'al levushai. And there's a downpour, and he gets drenched. So he's got water on his head, and the rest of his body is covered, but he gets his clothing soaked with water. So now, you're walking in the Rishus harabim, you've got water on your exposed head, and you've got a lot of water on your clothing. Is that an issue of hoitzah? Now you walk dalan amas in Rishus harabim, you're transporting water, dalan amas in Rishus harabim. Is that an issue? Says the Mechaber, lo hikpidu bay. We're not makbid on that. We're not concerned with that. Okay, let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. It's Kat Chav Gimel. Says the Mishnah Berurah, lo hikpidu bay. We're not concerned with this. Why not? Says the Mishnah Berurah, what the Mechaber wants to say is, Lefi shehem mu'atim. First of all, how much water are we talking about? So your head is exposed. How much water is going to get on your head? Even if you get stuck in a downpour, how much water is going to get stuck on your head? Then you have the mayim that's on your clothing. Now the mayim that's on your clothing, we could break down into 2 different types of mayim. There's the mayim that your clothing is going to absorb. Well, that mayim, even if your clothing gets soaking wet, there's no question that the water that gets absorbed into your clothing is bottled to the clothing, right? It's not considered a separate entity anymore. Once it's absorbed into the clothing, it's bottled to the clothing. Now you're allowed to wear your clothing on Shabbos because the clothing is bottled to you. It's not considered that you're carrying your clothing. So the water that's absorbed into your clothing, we're not concerned about. We're only concerned about the water that remains, kind of like beads up, or remains on the surface of your clothing. So what water are we talking about here? We're talking about the water that's on the exposed parts of your body, and the water that remains on the surface of your clothing. Says the Chofetz Chaim, how much water is that? We're talking about a very, very minute amount of water. We know that every malacha on Shabbos, every single one of the lamites malachas, in order for it to be an issa daraisa, you have to perform the malacha with a minimal amount. So, for example, kaisiv, writing. In order to be over the issa daraisa of writing, you have to write a minimal amount. You have to write 2 letters. In order to be over this daraisa of hoitzah, it depends what you're carrying. you have to be carrying a chashava amount of whatever it is that you're carrying. Now, the Mishnah tells us that when it comes to mayim, you're not over Haitzah Midaraisa on carrying mayim unless you carry enough water that is called Loshev Behenes HaKilor, the amount of water that you would need to hydrate the dry ingredients that are used for an ointment for the eye. So when you wanted to make an ointment for the eye, you took dry ingredients, you had to add a liquid agent to it, you had to add water to it to thin it out and to create a salve and to create an ointment, and then you could apply it to the eye. That's the minimal amount of water that you have to carry in order to be over Haitzah on Mayim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Chavetz Chaim brings down over here, he's bringing this down, I believe, from the Beis Yosef. The Prima Godim explains to Beis Yosef this way. He says the amount of water that's going to be on the exposed parts of your body, together with the water that's not absorbed into your clothing, it's going to be, generally speaking, it's going to be less than the minimum shear that you need to be over Haitzah. And therefore, lo gazru bazeh, and therefore the Chachamim didn't make even an Issa D'Rabbanan on this. And for another 4 very important words, shehu shaloi k'derech Haitzah. Let's remember, what you're doing over here is also shaloi k'darkoi. This is a shinui. This is not the normal way to carry water. When you want to carry water, you put it in a cup, you put it in a bowl, you carry water. You don't carry water on your head and on your clothing. So for sure, this could only be an Issa D'Rabbanan, because it's Haitzah shaloi k'derech. But not only is it Haitzah shaloi k'derech, you're also not going to have this shear, and therefore we're not concerned with this. According to Taisus, even if you have a lot of water absorbed in your garments, and I'm not going to go too deep into this, but if you look at the Taz and you look at Taisus, there are other reasons why we're also not makpid on this. One of them is, it's impossible. We don't make Zeris D'Rabbanan where people are not going to be able to be Mekayim them. What are we going to say? Are we going to say that if you're walking home from shul on a Friday night and you get stuck in a downpour, you have to strip? You have to take your clothing off? Because the water that's absorbed in your body can't be. So they didn't make such a Zeris D'Rabbanan. Also, like I told you before, the water that's absorbed into your clothing is bottled to your clothing is bottled to you, and therefore it is not a Haitzah issue. Moving along to Sif Ches, the bottom line, Kuf Samach Aleph B'Bei, says the Mechaber. Now, finally, we're going to talk about Tefillah with a Tes Vez Yud Lamed Hey, being Toivel in a mikveh. Now, why are you Toivel in a mikveh? Well, you're Toivel in a mikveh for Tumah and Tahara. So let's go back in the day. Let's go back. Mehera Yibana Migdash. The Rebbeinu Shalom should bring the Geula Shleima. We should have a base on Migdash today. By the way, FYI, you should just know that we all know that one of the questions they're going to ask us, Lachamei Esrim, when we come up to Shemayim, they're going to ask us, Tzipisa Yeshua? Were you hoping for the coming of Mashiach? Now, most people, I think, they're very comfortable saying yes. Why? Yeah, because we all hope that Mashiach is going to come soon, right? Rabbi Weiss ends every shir. We should be zayich to the B'Yisrael Tzedek B'Erev Yameinu Amen. Everybody who speaks by Shavuot Brachas, we should be zayich to the B'Yisrael Tzedek B'Erev Yameinu Amen. Every shir ends that way. Every lecture ends that way. Every speech at the Shavuot Brachas ends that way. So yeah, we all hope that Mashiach is going to come. That's not pshat in Tzipisa Yeshua. At least according to Rav Moshe, it certainly isn't that way. Rav Moshe, it's very clear from a tshuva that Rav Moshe Zechat Tzaddik Kodesh Levracha held that the chiyuv of Tzipisa Yeshua is that you have to expect that Mashiach is coming today. You wake up in the morning, Baruch Hashem, Mashiach is going to come today. Mashiach doesn't come. But your expectation, it's not just a hope. So like my Rebbe, Reb Reuven Feinstein, soll sein gesund und stark, said to me once, he said, it's not I am waiting for Mashiach. Ani mamin be'amunah shalema bevias haMashiach va'af al pi sheyis mameya, even though he's been delayed, im kol zeh, with all this, with the fact that we've been waiting for Mashiach for thousands of years, 2,000 years, he hasn't come yet, im kol zeh achak eloi b'chol yom sheyavai. Most people translate that, I am waiting every day that he should come. Said Reb Reuven, it's not I'm waiting every day that he should come. I am awaiting. I am awaiting his coming every day. which means I wake up in the morning and I am awaiting his coming today. I'm awaiting that Mashiach is going to come today. Rav Moshe brings a very fascinating raya, ein kan mekoymai laha'arich. But in any case, as I was saying, you're toivel in a mikveh. We should have a Beis Hamikdash later on today, or in 5 minutes, or in 2 minutes. We should have a Beis Hamikdash. Tumah and tahara becomes very critical. We can't go to the Beis Hamikdash if we're tameh. We can't bring a carbon if we're tameh. We can't go near truma. So if I'm a farmer and I have to be mafresh truma, I can't be mafresh truma if I'm tameh. Tumah tahara, very critical. So you go to a mikveh to be toivel in the mikveh to become tar. Okay, nowadays, unfortunately, we don't have tumah tahara. Why are people going to the mikveh? Why are people makbid to go to the mikveh every day? Why do people go to the mikveh? Because of tumas keri. A man experiences a seminal discharge, he becomes tameh. Tumas keri. He's tameh. Now, that tumah is not a problem for us right now because we're all tameh. We're all tameh meis, and we can't become tar because we don't have a parah aduma. But there was takanas Ezra. Ezra was geyser that if a man is tameh from tumas keri, he's not allowed to daven, he's not allowed to learn Torah, he's not allowed to make a bracha. So you got to run to the mikveh to become tar. Now, the Gemara tells us that takanas Ezra was bottle. So really, we don't have to worry about takanas Ezra. Even if we're tameh, tumas keri, we're allowed to make brachas, we're allowed to say grishma, we're allowed to learn Torah, we're allowed to daven. It's all mutter because takanas Ezra was bottle. Nevertheless, there are people who are makbid on takanas Ezra, and that's why they go to the mikveh. So it's not just some kind of ruchnius heebie-jeebie that I'm holy if I go to the mikveh. It all goes back to takanas Ezra. Of course, nashim, women, go to the mikveh if they're a nida. A woman who's a nida has to go to the mikveh to be toivel herself, to become tahar, because even though she doesn't need to be tahar as far as tumah and tahara, but she has to be muteris to her husband. She has to become permissible to her husband for marital relations. So she has to go to the mikveh to become mutter for tashvish hamita, harchakas, etc., etc. She has to take off the tumah of nidus. She has to be ois nida. She has to go to the mikveh. Okay, now, we've been concerned here in Shin Chavav with an Isser Rechitza. But, again, I'm going to tell you, we saw very clearly in the Mechaber that the Isser Rechitza does not apply to cold water. So now, you want to go to a cold mikveh? L'chayra, go ahead. What problem would there be in going into a cold mikveh? Not only that, the mikveh doesn't have to be cold. The mikveh just can't be chamin. It can't be hot, right? The Isser Rechitza, the Isser D'Rabbanan, is only on hot water, even on water that was heated up before Shabbos. But the Isser Rechitza is only on hot water. It's not on cold water, and it's not on warm water. What's called warm? I mentioned to you earlier, according to Rav Moshe, anything that a person would not consider a hot bath. So halacha l'maisa, if the water temperature is less than 98.6, according to Rav Moshe, it's already considered feishrin. It's considered warm, not hot. Why? Because if it's less than your body temperature, when you go into it, you're not experiencing hot water. You're really experiencing somewhat cool water. So that's not ma'im chamin. It's ma'im feishrin. So to go into a mikveh that's 94 degrees, what's the problem? There should be no issue at all. Now, we did see that the minig is that we don't bathe even in cold water. Okay, let's put that aside for a moment. Especially over here, you have a need to go to the mikveh. You're not going to the mikveh just to go for a swim. You're not going to the mikveh just to cool yourself off, right? You're going to the mikveh to take off your tumah. You're going for a purpose, right? So now, is this mutter or not? Says the Mechaber Sivches. Adam mutter litbal mitumasai b'Shabbos. You're allowed to go be toivel in the mikveh to take off your tumah on Shabbos. Now, again, if we're speaking about cold, what need is there to be matir anything? Especially in the world of the Mechaber. The Mechaber is not telling us Sivches to tell us that counter the minig, you could go be toivel in cold water. The Mechaber never discussed that minig. The Mechaber never told us such a minig. It's only the Mishnah Berurah told us such a minig. So why is the Mechaber telling us that it's mutter to go into a cold mikveh or into a warm mikveh? Why should it be aser? The answer is because of a different problem. We know that if you buy a new keli that requires tfilas kelim, you're not allowed to do, well, we learned the machloikis, whether or not you're allowed to do tfilas kelim on Shabbos. Why? Because according to some, it's called tikkun. It looks like tikkun moneh. It looks like you're repairing something. Prior to the tefillah, the keli wasn't usable. Now the keli is usable. It looks like tikkun moneh. If you have a keli that's really tameh, to go ahead and be tovel it, tikkun moneh. You're repairing the keli. Before it was tameh, now it's tar. So too, maybe you would think by a person. Maybe you go into the mikveh, there's a problem here of tikkun. You're going ahead and, so to speak, you are repairing yourself. And maybe this should be at least an issur d'Rabbanan. Says the Mechaber, no. You're allowed to go to the mikveh to be tovel from Tumah on Shabbos. Now, let's take a look here at this Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah Kan Chav Daled. Adam, Ritzayin Alam. What the Mechaber wants to tell you here, because he doesn't need to tell you that going into a cold mikveh is mutter, or to go into a warm mikveh is mutter, because the Mechaber holds that that's 100% mutter. Well, even if you're not tameh. So why does he have to tell me this halacha? Says the Mishnah Berurah, Tzayna Loimar. What the Mechaber wants to tell you is, Af al gav de kli aser lat biloi uletara mitamasai b'Shabbos v'yomtiv mipnei shenirik misakin akli al yedei zeh. Even though if you have a keli that's tameh, you're not allowed to go dunk it in a mikveh in order to be matar it, because there's a problem of tikkun moneh. We're not talking about tefillas kelim here for a new keli. We're talking about tum and tara. You have a keli that's tameh, you're not allowed to be tovel it, tikkun moneh. Adam shani, a person is different. Why? When we see somebody going to the mikveh, we don't automatically have to assume that he's going into the mikveh to do tikkun. We don't have to look at it that he's going into the mikveh to repair himself, to take off his tumah. Back in the day, mikvahs were a dime a dozen, and the Beis HaMerchatz had a mikveh. So, I don't know, is he going into the mikveh to be matar himself, or is he going into the mikveh to cool off? It's 104 degrees outside. He wants to cool off. Va'afilu him ha'es kar, and even if it's the winter, v'gam hamayim sruchim, and even if the filter is broken and the water is not clean, she'ein derech lirchotz b'hem. So you see the guy, it's 20 degrees outside, and the guy's going into the mikveh, and the mikveh is not clean. You're not thinking that he's going to cool himself off. Afal pikein, says the Mishnah Berurah, it still would be mutter. Mikam malkaim, nevertheless, lipa'amim kishadam b'min aderech. Sometimes a person comes from the road, umaluchlach betit v'tzaya, and he's dirty. Back in the day, they were going on dirty streets. They weren't paved. They were dirt roads. So a person came home from a long walk, and he's all dirty. Haderech lerchaitzaf be'elu. A person would wash himself, even in cold water during the winter, even if the water is not so clean. He has to clean himself off from the dirt from the road. Val kain mutter afilu hayiyachal litbal kaidam haShabbos. And therefore, to be tovel from Tumah is mutter on Shabbos. Why? So again, if the water is warm, not hot, or if the water is cold, there's no problem of the issur of rechitza. And we're not going to apply an issur of tikkun, because it's not obvious that he's doing tikkun. Maybe it has nothing to do with tikkun. Maybe he wants to just cool himself off or clean himself off from the dirt of the road. Okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah, v'noyhagas hanoshim, women are noyig, she'enon tovlois shaloi bizmanon b'Shabbos. We know that if the night for a woman to go to the mikveh falls out on Friday night, women go to the mikveh on Friday night. It's tfilas mitzvah, and it's a mitzvah to be tovel on the proper night, right? Shiva Nikiyim is over. That night, a woman goes to the mikveh. That's tefillah bizmana. That's being tovel at the proper time. That's a mitzvah. We do it even on Shabbos. No problem. It's rechitza in warm water. According to Rav Moshe, the water cannot be hot. It has to be warm, less than 98.6. For those chassidim out there, chassidim, I believe, are not makbid on that. I believe that the chassidim go with the carbon nesanel, who says that you're allowed to be tovel in the mikveh even if it's hot. Why? What happened to the issur rechitza? Carbon nesanel holds that being tovel in a mikveh is not a din of rechitza. That's the halacha, the issur d'Rabbanan of rechitza doesn't apply to tefillah, because you're not going to wash yourself. You're going to take off tumah. So I believe the chassidim go with the carbon nesanel, and they hold that tefillas mitzvah is mutter even in hot water. By us, Litvisha, those at least paskin like Rav Moshe Zachatzaddik Levracha, we're makbid that the water should not be chamin, it should be feishrin, it should be only warm. Having said that, women go to the mikvah when it's tefillah bizmana. But what if a woman is not going to the mikvah on the proper night? What do you mean she's not going on a proper night? She can't go early. What if really Shiva Nikiyim was over on Wednesday and she could have gone to the mikvah Wednesday night? But her husband was traveling, so she didn't run to go to the mikvah on Wednesday night. Now, she was expecting her husband to come home on the following Sunday. Now she gets a phone call, her husband is coming home on Friday. Gavaldik, but now she wants to run to the mikveh because she has to be toivel. Her husband is coming home. Could she go to the mikveh Friday night? Now it's tefillah shaloi b'zmana. Says the Mishnah Berurah, v'noyegas anashim, the women are noyeg she'enon toivloi shaloi b'zmanon b'Shabbos. If it falls out on Friday night, but it's not tefillah b'zmana, they don't go on Shabbos. V'kasra paiskim the yafa nagu, and he brings down the paiskim say, brings down Trumas Hadeshen and others that this is proper. Mishum dekeva the saif haminig bizmanenu lesa b'Shabbos lurkaitz kalaguf afilu b'tzayin v'chanal. Since we know that our minig is that we don't bathe kol haguf or roiv haguf even in cold water on Shabbos. Im kein nikr dehu mishum tefila u'mechzikim esakin. So wait a second. The math that the Mishnah Berurah is doing is like this. What's the whole heter of sivches to be toivel from Tumah on Shabbos? The heter is, first of all, you're going in cold water or only warm water, which really meikar adin is mutter. You're worried about tikkun? It doesn't look like tikkun. It doesn't really look like tikkun. Maybe you're just washing yourself off. Now you have a woman who wants to go to the mikveh shaloi b'zmana. Says the Mishnah Berurah, better don't do it. Why? First of all, we don't really want to be matir rechitzas kol haguf, even in cold water, right? The minig is that we don't do it. And once the minig is that we don't do it, when somebody sees a woman going to the mikveh, we know that she's doing it for tikkun. We can't say, oh, we don't know if she's really doing it for tikkun. Maybe she's only doing it to cool herself off. No, we don't wash kol gufay to cool ourselves off because of the minig. So it's obvious that what she's doing is for tikkun. And therefore, we're not matir it if it's shaloi b'zmanai. Let's finish this. Mishnah Berurah says the Mishnah Berurah v'kasva achrayim, the achrayim right, to become makim near the mutter litbal l'kiryai. If we're dealing with a man who wants to go to the mikveh because of takanas Ezra, the achrayim right that it's mutter. Kevan den ispatel atakana. Why? Because what problem are you going to apply? You want to say that it's a problem of tikkun? It's not really a tikkun. Why? Because like I told you earlier, nispatel atakana. Takanas Ezra, me'ikar adin, was bottle. And therefore, a mutter b'tayru b'tfila, afilu kaidim tfila. We paskin that Takanas Ezra was bottle. So are you allowed to say Kriya Shema if you're Tamei, Tumas Keri? Yes. Are you allowed to daven? Yes. Are you allowed to learn Torah? Yes. Are you allowed to make a bracha? Yes. So in that case, what tikkun is there? Though you can't answer it because of tikkun. There is no tikkun. There's nothing that that it was also for you to do that now it's mutter for you to do. So there's no tikkun. So we can't answer it for tikkun purposes. The chanal b'simin peiches. Im kein loy mechzikim esakin al yedei tefillah. So the only problem that you have is the minig, that we don't do rechitzas kol haguf, even in cold water. But okay, you're not doing it for rechitza, you're doing it for tefillah. Vayin v'mashik asavdu b'bir halacha diyesh machmirin, there are those that are machmir v'soivrin de'in l'chalik bein tefillas keri l'shar tumas. That there is a sheet that's machmir. U'misha noig l'hakal, if somebody has the minig to be mekel, ein limchais b'yadai, you shouldn't protest. Ki roiv ha'achrayim soispin l'hakal b'zeh. V'al kol panim b'nitba b'Shabbos v'yom tov gufa nira b'vadei dein l'achmir. Certainly if somebody became tamei tumas keri on Shabbos or Yom Tov, so he didn't have the opportunity to go to the mikveh before Shabbos or Yom Tov, certainly the Mishnah Berurah says he shouldn't be machmer. V'chein nispashet haminig lahatir. However, says the Mishnah Berurah, yizar ma'od, a person should be very careful, shelo yavoi lidei schita, that he shouldn't come to a problem of schita. He shouldn't come to squeeze out his hair. He shouldn't come to get a towel wet and squeeze out a towel to hu isser gomer, because that would be an isser da'araisa. Okay, we're going to stop over here. We'll continue next time with Siftes. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The source of limud HaTorah should be Megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua Sefuras Panas and Sheduchim to those in need. We should be zoichet to see the Biaskel Tzedek B'meher V'yameinu today. Be well.